Thank you very much. Because one never knows, because I don't speak any Norwegian. This is my third time in Norway. The first time was in 1972, and Olaf, who is responsible for all the technical stuff here, he's also from Kristiansand, and that's where I ended up and made some hiking tour in 1972. And my second time was just in March for the Eco Box. And now I'm here, and I'm supposed to present you a little bit about Austria, which I will, hoping in 25 minutes. And as you know, Vorarlberg, I think he mentioned it, is a very small province, and that's where I traveled from Zurich to Oslo by airplane. And unfortunately, as everybody knows, this is quite a long way, so it's an emission of 722 kilograms of CO2 that I emitted, I'm afraid. The average Indian person, that's almost a year that I emitted for my flight here and back. And the average Austrian person emits 8,000 kilograms of CO2. And I've looked up in the internet and I found that the Norwegians emit about 10,000. So that's quite a little bit more, but well, you're further up north, so maybe that's the reason. So Austria, as I mentioned, is a small country. It's a very small country, and Vorarlberg is even smaller. Vorarlberg is the smallest province in the Austrian provinces. Doesn't work. Come on. Yes. It only inhabits very little people. It only inhabits 370,000 inhabitants. And you can see all the rest. You can read a little bit. It's not very important. So it's about 80 architectural offices we have. So that's not very much. But we have, so far, we have succeeded a little bit. If you look at solar thermal installed power per 1,000 capita, we are just right behind Cyprus with solar thermal power installed. And this is the installation per year, so it's rising, and it's quite good because solar energy is there forever. And it's also biomass heating plants, which are rising now. So we are heading towards a little bit into forward. And it's also the density of passive houses in Europe has worked quite well because 20 years ago I have started to introduce the passive house concept from Germany, introduced it into Vorarlberg, and from there onwards to the other provinces, to Austria. So that's how we managed it. It was a program called CFOIS, Cost-Efficient Passive Houses as European Standards, which we've done in the year 2000, which did help quite a little bit. So, and within Austria, you can see V for Vorarlberg, the province. We also have the greatest amount of the passive houses. And also there is a benchmark called European Energy Award, where the municipalities are striving towards sustainability. And as you can see here, these are small municipalities in Vorarlberg. The first three in the European context have got the golden awards for that. So we are doing quite well. And if you look at the bicycling proportions, and Vorarlberg is quite a hilly country, as you have seen on the first pictures. Vorarlberg is also doing quite well. And the interesting thing is that I'm rather a man who believes in Churchill. Churchill says no sports, but there's something I really do, and this machine gives a warm, that produces the energy for a 4-family flat, 130 square meters, and it produces not only warm rooms for 130 square meters, but also the hot water for 4 persons and fresh air. And as you can see, it's 4 times folding up. It goes quite quickly, and that's what it does. And now it's almost ready. And you can see how I produce that energy if I put on the next slide. Yes, that's how I do it. And so you can see it really works. It does work quite well. And you can read how I do it, because that's what usually people do. They go by car 10 kilometers, and 10 kilometers is not very much, so you can ride it easily on this bike. So this actually could be the end of my presentation. Because if you look at the next slide. So it's quite easy. Okay. Oops. That was not good. Still working? Yes. So you can buy it here in Oslo. This is I rented it from the cycling shop. It's just around the corner here. So I ride mine. This is not mine, but I ride mine since 20 years, and I go almost every day with that to the office, and it's working well. But what I really want to say is that Austria looks like as it's really on the front side, because if you look at all these different countries, I've just taken out some of them, because it's 257 countries in the world, and maybe it looks now as if Austria is really on the forefront. But actually, we all have to hurry up. So it's easy for you Norwegians to overtake Austria. Easy, if you do it right. Because if you do it right, that is important to me. If you look at the map of just 7,000 years, that's not very much, is it? So if you look back here to 3000 BC, 2000 BC, there were lots of culture which we still admire in the museums. They're so beautiful. And they've done it with no oil, no gas. And if you look at this map here, you can see that the population is rising and rising and rising. It's supposed to go up to 12 billion of people. And our living standard, my living standard, I live better than a king in the Middle Ages. It's just because of this, I call it the oil fart. It's the old fart, it's a gas fart, and it's nothing more, because it will vanish quite soon. And if you look at the world's primary energy consumption, it's 25% coal, it is 34% oil, it is 22% gas, it's some nuclear, and it's just 18%, 14% of renewables. So it's not very much. So actually, most of it is black. It's black energy, dark energy. And I don't think we should really believe in dark energy. We should rather believe in yellow-green energy, which is sustainable, which will last for the next thousands of years. And so it works well. But actually, please always remember, what do we need energy for? We don't need energy by itself. We need energy because we want to live a good life. And to live a good life does mean that we have energy for our homes, to have them warm in the winter, cool in the summer. We want to be mobile, right? That's what we want to be. We want to buy things, we want to eat and drink, and we want it for our public buildings, for our swimming things, for our libraries, for whatever. And this is the Swiss, this is a Swiss chart looking at the primary energy consumption of 3 different people. It's Anderson, the bargain hunter, Janssen, the Mr. Average, and Olsen, the quality conscious. And as you can see, they all earn the same amount of money. All earn the same amount of money, but they give it to different options. And as you can see, the quality conscious produces much less energy, produces much less CO2 emissions, but he lives a very good life. So he can do very differently according to his private decision. So you can look it up in www.novatlantis.ch. It's a Swiss thing they've done very carefully, as the Swiss are. They always do their job very carefully. And I looked up just recently, I heard in the radio, in the news, a very interesting new study published just a few days ago. You can see at the 7th of June in 2011, and you can see the red dot, but you can't read it because it's in German, haha. But I translated it into English, and it says, total life cycle of all the products is included in this research. And the imports, that's the important fact. The imports for people's consumption account for about 60% of the total environmental input. So that has to be added to the CO2 emission, to the footprint, we produce in our own countries. And that applies to Norway too. So 60% is extra because of we have delivered it to other countries. So, and that here you can see the detailed charts. This is all pollution through import, and that's pollution through the production inside the country. And that applies probably also to Austria, but it's a very careful Swiss research. As you can see here, the world's charge for all the most important countries here rising. The Arab Emirates, of course, on top, Europe in the middle here, and Norway being second. So sometimes it's not good to be second. So sometimes it's better to be further down. In that case, it would be. So you have a long way to go, as we have too. And we have to think that 50% of all the houses go in, of all our energy, of all our capital costs, of our raw materials, of the waste, about 50% goes into buildings, is because of buildings. And I've also looked at that up. Norway and Denmark, as Austria, as Germany, as all the other European countries, have a rising amount of square meters per person. And that, of course, means more raw materials, more energy losses, more of all that. So we have to really be thoughtful about how our buildings are performing in the next decades. As you can see, this is the Swiss chart for the rising from 1910 to 2010. Rising, rising, rising. And when you look back into the history, you can see here that people already in 1948, 51, 55, 58 said important things about what is going to happen. So the best solutions, for example, he said, Buckminster Fuller, a very important architect, he said, fossil fuels deposits must be conserved. The life-regenerating processes exclusively should come from the power of the wind, the water, and of the radiation energy of the sun. 1951, Buckminster Fuller, architect and engineer. So, news magazines for young men, age 10 to 18, in the 50s in Germany, in Austria, and Switzerland, were reading these magazines where it said, how will we live in 1975? That's being published in 1955. So in 20 years' time, they thought we will live in that way. And they said in the same magazine that, you can read it here, that most of the reservoir is being used already. And it says that we are now consuming in a single year about as much as energy as nature has deposited over 5 billion of years. And seldom has an inherited fortune been so wastefully misspent. So one can see that the time when the crude oil, coal, and natural gas deposits are exhausted is approaching with the relentlessness of a death watch beetle, written in 1955. So these are the reasons. And they also said, how should we do? What should we do? And they said 1958 in this other magazine, they said, yes, do houses like that. So you will lose much less energy, you will have some solar energy, and you will spend only 200 German marks for that. And they also said, put solar collectors on the houses. And they said, it's 5 square meters for a typical family house with a 300 liters of solar tank. Nothing really has changed very much of that. So what happened when we had the energy crisis in 73 and the energy crisis in 79? That was that. Did it really change very much? Not really. But the United Kingdom, they had to realize that their oil has gone down. And so you can see here, it's the production, and that's the discovery, the green one. And for Norway, the story is quite the same. So that's worldwide the same. So we can say what we find is less and what we use is more. So as you've seen in the first charts, we have to change. So the targets are easy. It is about 2,000 watts per person, that's permanent power, that equals up to 70,500 kilowatt hours per year primary energy for a society with a reasonable affluence so that we really can live well. So it's about 1 ton of CO2 emissions per person only, not 10, not 8, not 6, resulting of about 500 watts fossil fuels, that's a quarter, and 1,500 watt renewables without any CO2 emissions. And the story broken down to the buildings is about 600 watts per person, or 110 kilowatt hours per square meter in a year for living in houses. So and again, a quarter for fossil fuels and 3/4 for renewables. And the Swiss, being very carefully, they looked at their own consumption, 6,000 watts, and they said we have to come down to 2,000. And as you can see here, I enlightened it a little bit so that you can see it more clearly. It's 2,000 watts, and more than half of it, as we already know, is for buildings. And so therefore, we really have to bring it down, as has been said, down to almost zero energy houses. But we have to look at the total consumption. This is Switzerland, this is Austria, this is Germany, because we have about the same ideas. This is the building code at the moment. This is the passive house for heating, but there's warm water. There's, of course, also electricity in the houses, and there's, of course, the embedded energy for production and for retrofitting the houses. So we have to think also of that. And if you think of the 2,000 watt society, that's here, that's a red dotted line. So even the almost zero energy house, the passive house concept, is not good enough. So we have to look carefully at the biggest part, which is the electricity, and to bring that down. That's important stuff. But it's the envelope too. So we have to think that a living room, and I live in a passive house now since 10 years, is about 30 square meters, and 30 square meters will use not very much, but how much is it when you have to heat it not with electricity, but maybe with candlelights? How many thousands candlelights would you have to have for a living room to heat it up, even if it's very cold? So it's only 10 candlelights for a passive house which is really a passive house and not just a name-dropped passive house, which is quite important because we do have in Europe quite some name-dropping passive houses, which are where not is in the building what it is being called. So my energy bill does reflect only that amount for a living room, and it's perfectly. And low energy houses or passive houses that are not passive houses, of course, will use more. Okay. So as you can see here, these are 10 candlelights, that's it. Sorry, what's happened here? There's one missing. Come on. So the important thing is that if the heating system breaks down, and it broke down twice in my life, our houses start to cool down very quickly and quite deep down. So in my case, it was down to 7 degrees Celsius, which was not very nice. In passive houses, because they are so well insulated, they don't cool down as quickly and not as deep down, which is an advantage. So insulation does keep warm, that's right. And second, what happens if unusual occurrences happen again, and if it's for people who are not wealthy? There are always people who are not wealthy. For example, in Vorarlberg, a very rich province of Austria, we had 12,000 households being in need to get subsidy because they couldn't pay their heating bills in the winter. And it was 250 euros subsidy per household, which summed up to 3 million euros for the small province of Austria. And this is 250 euros, that's almost my bill. I paid 270 euros for 130 square meters, 4 persons, warm rooms, warm water. So it does really work quite well. So the most relevant activities in Vorarlberg which have helped us to get into the position that we are in now was that we started a subsidy for energy-saving buildings in 1990. We started subsidy for solar collectors in 1991, information centers all over Vorarlberg in 1992. We had the remote control is a little bit slow. We had 93 dissemination starts with the passive house concept in 2 week seminars. We had in '96 the first Austrian passive houses in Vorarlberg, and we started in '99 the project C4S Austria, cost-efficient passive houses, a European project for 5 European countries. And we had 9 passive houses in 5 provinces in Austria, which are documented in that book, which you can download from our homepage. It's even in English with nice pictures and charts. We started to add to the energy aspects, ecological aspects, 16 of them in 2000. We started in 2004 subsidy for passive houses, and we started in 2007 passive house as a compulsory standard for council housing, and the remote control. And 2008, we started the Energy Future for Vorarlberg. That was a participation of the people from different parts of the society, politicians, administration people, economy, NGOs, builders, architects, and all that, in order to then lead to a parliament's decision for a strategic goal that Vorarlberg will be energy autonomous by the year 2050. So that is the story for Vorarlberg. And now I was being told, although I started 6 minutes later, I was told that I should finish in 2 minutes. So I will have to jump to a slide. And I will need the help of Olaf. Olaf, can you listen? So you will put in the number, just a second. You will put in the number. In order to be able to finish earlier. Yes. Okay, I have to do it this way, sorry. I don't like to do it this way, but I had to. So, we also started with the commitment for passive house standards in different communities. As you can see here, we had the obligation for the social houses, for the social governmental non-profit developers. Since 2007, we had a resolution on principle by some municipalities. We had 2009 residential buildings by private developers, and 2010 the building code regulation. And as you can see, there are quite a lot of decisions pro-passive house in Europe, which work quite well. And in order to help the communities, we help them for their conference halls, for their hospitals, for whatever. As you can see, with some organizing guidance. And I'm afraid I have to jump through that. Okay, and we also started to have for the communities a Beratungsangebot, a consulting, and we also added for that a certain process which I would also think would be helpful for Norway too, but I can't explain it now. And especially it is the certification for passive houses which is important, because otherwise you only get numbers on the paper, and the certification gives you the assurance that they really do work. So in order to come down to really zero energy houses, we have some scientific projects working on that, and of course we also have to look at the old buildings. So to modernize these old buildings, it is possible, it has been proven, it has been shown, and we also show it to our people. That was the consumption of that old house before, and that was after the renovation according to passive house technologies. And that's what they looked before, that's what they look now. And the people are quite happy there. The houses are 50 years old, and this school is also about 40 years old. It has been retrofitted with passive house standards, and we, of course, we also added some other things, because there is more than energy. There is also the healthy climate indoors. There's the healthy building materials, which is important, and that sums up to a program to a program we called Klimaaktiv House. Now, the last thing I would like to tell you is what we have learned within the 25 years. So now we've learned that no name dropping. If you call it a meter is a meter. If a kilogram is a kilogram is a kilogram. But so far, the kilowatt hour per square meter and year, according to the Passive House standard, with 15 kilowatt hours, seems to be quite different in some European countries. And if you don't use the standard of a Passive House, don't call it a Passive House standard, which I think is quite important, because there's not only the way to the future in Passive Houses, but it is one of the ways, and there are also other ways. So, well, that's what I think is important. Second, it's important to have to communicate the steps towards energy efficiency clearly to the public, to the people. Third, it is important to have lighthouse projects that really work and are guided well enough. So the first lighthouse projects should be done perfectly, like the Swiss do. Because if they don't work, people will not believe in the following projects, especially if they are not evaluated, if the quality assurance hasn't worked, and if the measurements have not been done carefully and communicated again to all of us. And the fifth one is education of all involved groups, from the architect to the engineer, and of course to the others. And of course you have to have a guidance to the first projects, which is important, which we have organized for our architects, so that if they do it the first time, they are guided very well by well-trained other architects, by well-trained other experts. And the public finances should be concentrated only on those and shouldn't be spread around the country, which Austria has done for quite a while, and it didn't help us really very much in the times. So the further energy the further education is important, which we have organized in 14 days courses, where you have different options to do, where you can also guide an architect for his projects, which is important, which then leads to an exam, which he can do, or he's guided with his project and also gets the certified European Passive House Designer certificate. So there are different ways to do that. And and that's it. So I would finish up with the last slides with the important network. It's the building construction subsidy. It is second, the consultancy and the information. It is third, the public relations. It is fourth, the planners and the craftsmen. It's the energy concept and the political will. And it's, of course, the local authority activities. And last not least, it's important to have engaged clients. If it's the developer or if it's the private person, that really doesn't matter. But that is the important stuff. So thank you very much. I hope I could tell you something from Austria. And I wish you all the best for your projects. Do better than we did. Thank you very much.